Hello there. Welcome to the case study Back to School with Claris. My name is Todd Weller with Cross IT Services and Solutions. Here's some information about me while I'm working and while I'm not at work. But that is all the time I have to talk about that. However, I will add that despite any similarity in appearance, I have never played a doctor on television. But if you say, "Talk to me, Goose," in the hallway, I am going to stop and talk to you. All right, so before we go forward, let me give you a brief history. As we heard in the keynote presentation last night, that specifically Claris Connect and the one roster connector that allows information to go from student information systems into Apple School Manager is a focus for Claris over the last year or so. But this product actually predates that. This is an existing customer where we introduced FileMaker a number of years ago and then have been able to expand what they're using in the platform. So we're kind of taking the opposite approach, and this gives you an overview of everything that we're able to do with the school. So let's go ahead and start at the beginning. Cross IT, in addition to being FileMaker developers and consultants, we also have a technical services team that does, networks and server infrastructure installs, things of that nature. And so FileMaker was actually a tool that they used internally. We had several network engineers at the time. This would be mid-2000s that had a number of Apple certifications. So they would go out and do installs of Apple hardware for companies in general, but specifically schools. And that included work with installing Xserves. So if you'll join me in a moment of silence for the Xserve before we continue. All right, so in addition to the Xserves, just installing the hardware, part of that was to go ahead and pull data from the various student information systems they would encounter as they go into these schools so that they can then create the import file that can be used in Open Directory to create all the necessary accounts. Of course, there's some special things with Open Directory where it needed to be a colon-separated format file. Also, with different information systems, you're getting data in different formats. And also the schools would have specific formats of how they wanted the student username or student email address formatted, what password protocol they wanted to use as far as complexity and things of that nature. And so FileMaker became the tool that we used in order to massage that data that was coming from the student information systems and then being able to format it and get it into a format that made Open Directory happy when we did the imports. Now, one of these clients was the New Kensington Arnold School District, which is located in northeast of downtown Pittsburgh along the Allegheny River, if you're familiar with Western Pennsylvania. The district encompasses approximately 5 square miles, so it's not a huge district by most standards, but regardless of the size of the school, any school is going to be able to benefit from having this type of technology in place for their tech department. Here's a map just kind of showing you the school is approximately a 19-mile drive from downtown Pittsburgh at PNC Park, which is the home of the Pittsburgh Pirates, to get up to the high school. Now, as far as staff and students, the faculty and staff number approximately 280, and then they take care of approximately 2,000 total students. That includes both those that are in the buildings as well as cyber learning students, which means that the tech team, which is currently 4 individuals, they manage 2,100 iPads and 300 computers across the district. All right, so we'd installed Xserves for them. They really liked this tool that they saw our team using to create those accounts, and they wanted to be able to do it more often than just at the beginning of each new school year as students were advanced grade levels and then new students were added. And so they installed FileMaker Server. They got licenses for a few clients so that they would be able to run this process for themselves. And then over the years, we would assist them with updates to the file. One of the big ones, of course, would be when we updated it for Active Directory. And then we've made some additional updates over the years whenever, home directory, paths changed, emails changed because of switching from, services that provided email, things of that nature, to keep the file up to date and usable. Currently, the process that is used is that there is a manual export from the student information system. Then from there, there's a few button clicks to take that exported file, import it into the Claris FileMaker solution, run the necessary calculations to set up the accounts and things that are needed, and then to generate an export file that can then be imported into Active Directory using a third-party tool called Dovestone. All right, so here are a few screenshots of what that solution looks like. I do ask that if you please be kind. This solution was built, I believe, in FileMaker 9. So a lot of the layouts, of course, are going to inherit, the design standards of that time. And so it still very much looks like it came from that era. And because it just works, we haven't gone back and invested the time needed to modernize the layouts with updated themes and that. So you'll just have to bear with me on this one. So here we have the user tab that shows the account type, the student name, what building they are assigned to. Then we have some specific information for the student, like homeroom, grade level, graduation year. We are using FileMaker to generate a QR code that's going to be used, as you'll see here later. Then here we have a window that shows what the export line is for the Active Directory export. And we are able to use this if we encounter a student that ended up in the wrong group or OU or something. We can go back here, see what the calculations were that generated that line in the export file, and then that helps us pinpoint where the error occurred, which is normally there's been a data entry error. It's not a problem with the FileMaker calculation. It's the data that we had to use to process those calculations. And then the last one that we're going to look at right now is just some automatic group assignments based on graduation year, as well as building. So a few more tabs, but we'll take a look at those as we dive into it. So that's the history of Claris FileMaker at the school. So what is Claris FileMaker doing currently? Well, we are solving a new problem for the school. A number of years ago, they implemented a one-to-one program for all students, which is every student in K through 12 receives an iPad for use in school and at home, to help with doing the homework and everything. And so when this program began here a few years ago, they handled the distribution and collection with sheets of paper. So what does that look like? Well, here's a sample of what the handout sheet looked like. We're capturing some signatures, also capturing the student ID. What I found really scary on this particular one that I picked as an example is that you see where the student ID is, there's a note in the margin that says, I think, which is yikes. When you're thinking about data conformity, that is certainly not something that you want to see. Here's the back of the form, which again is just, signed off. And then when the device is collected, there's another piece of paper that then is stapled to the original sheet that was used during the handout. And then all of those forms are taken and organized into 3-ring binders. I thought it was important to get a picture of those 3-ring binders so you can see them there. So if there's ever a question, you have to know how things are organized and pull up the appropriate binder to find that information. And then once, as time permits, they would take the information from the 3-ring binders, enter it into an Excel file that would allow them to list the student ID and the matching serial number of the device that the student had. So that was how they were tracking things, but they knew they had to be a better way, and because they saw what Claris FileMaker was able to do for their users and getting their accounts created in Active Directory, they approached us to see what we could do. We said, certainly we can do that, and so we expanded their solution to include an asset management module. It was set up as a separate file, obviously still connected to the user database so we could draw on that information. But part of this was we created the new file so that it would be optimized for use on an iPad. Because if you're going to be handing out iPads, it makes use to use an iPad to do that because you have now the mobility factor. And then, of course, you're able to scan barcodes and take pictures as needed, in addition to just doing data entry. The other thing that we're doing is we're pulling all of the device information from Jamf, which is their mobile device management software using API calls. Obviously, the school already knows what devices they have. We didn't want to make them have to go back and re-inventory all of their devices. And so the API calls will allow us to populate all of the inventory data in a FileMaker database using information that was already in their other system. And we'll look at some details about how that whole process looks here in just a bit. And from that point, once we had the user information, we had the device information, then all we needed to do was develop scripts and layouts for the check-in and check-out processes to make it as seamless and easy as possible. So for the process for adding devices, any of the newly purchased iPads from Apple appear automatically in Apple School Manager. Once they're in Apple School Manager, the devices are assigned to a pre-stage in Jamf, which lets Jamf know these devices should have this profile, these apps installed, things of that nature. And then once the devices are received, the tech department performs that first initialization of turning the device on to check it, make sure that everything is working. And then what that does is now the device moves out of the pre-stage and it is now an active device in Jamf. And then once it becomes an active device, then FileMaker Server runs a scheduled script twice a day, which is able to use the API calls to get the list of active devices and pulls it down. And then we're able to iterate through each API call to look for, does this device exist? If it does, we update the information in FileMaker. If it does not exist, then we go ahead and add it as a new device. And then the last piece of the puzzle here is that after the devices are in the inventory that we keep in FileMaker, the tech department is able to print labels with QR code serial numbers on it, which was not something that they could easily do from either Apple School Manager or from Jamf. So now they have a nice label that's on the back of each device. So once we had the devices, then we took a Word document that they had created that was used during the handout process and recreated that in FileMaker so that we could autofill the information from FileMaker when it was printed. You'll notice here that there is some information at the top specific to the student with the student ID, email address that's been assigned, password that's been assigned, as well as that barcode label that we discussed before. And then the rest of the sheet is just a bunch of information that the student needs to be able to turn their device on, get it connected to the school network, and make sure that they have the correct apps for their classes and things of that nature. Now you're probably wondering, why did I pick this particular student as my example? But I think, if you're talking about the best way to manage mobile devices for a school district, this is the way. Okay, so I have a couple examples, demos here, starting with the iPad distribution process. So what that is here, you see here's our new file with a much nicer theme, a little more modern. We've got some information about the student. We've got some icons on the right-hand side that let us know very quickly, is the device with the student or has it been returned to the tech team? We can click on those icons for more details. We can go to the menu, start the distribution process. And so the first step here is to go ahead and scan the user ID from that sheet of paper that the student was handed before they went down to the library to get their device. So we scan it. The system checks to see, did the student hand in all of their equipment at the end of the previous school year? If so, they're able to get everything again this year because the school does that where they collect all the equipment. And then from there, go ahead and scan the iPad that the student is going to be issued. And then that creates a journal record, which is my term for this snapshot of linking a particular student to a particular device at that point in time. We say they got all of the equipment, and now we are done and the device has been handed out. For a process that used to take quite a long time, they're able to do a class of 25 to 30 students in about 5 minutes. And for the entire high school, they were able to hand out all of the high school iPads in a single day. So they were very ecstatic about being able to do that. And of course, the teachers like it because it minimizes the amount of time that students are out of their class. Okay, iPad collection is another straightforward process, starting again from our list here of students. Go ahead and select collection. And here we just have to worry about scanning the barcode. So we go ahead and do that. Then it goes back, it finds that matching journal record for the current school year. We mark that everything was received. I know you'll notice at the top we have a couple of extra buttons here on this part of it, and that was to confirm that the serial number being collected matches what we say the student has, or if it is a mismatch. And what that was is we carry over as we transition from the Excel sheets to FileMaker, just in case that information that we imported was incorrect, and then we were able to capture the corrections. Now, after we developed the distribution and collection processes, we realized that we also needed to make allowances for an iPad swap. I mean, you would hope that you give the student a device at the beginning of the year, collect it at the end of the school year, but that's not always feasible because, accidents happen, a device could fail, so you need to be able to swap that device out. And of course, the school doesn't want the student to be without a device while it's being repaired, so they go ahead and collect that damaged device and give them a replacement device that then they just moving forward. All right, so again, starting from our database, list view here, go ahead and select the mid-year swap as the option. Start by scanning the returned iPad. Again, it brings up the collection screen where we're able to go ahead and mark that we don't have to worry about charger and cable because they're going to keep those accessories because they're getting another device. Here we're going to indicate that it has major damage. We're going to go ahead and confirm that the serial number is correct. And then because there is major damage, it probably makes sense to go ahead and document this. So let's go ahead and insert information about the cracked screen here. So we're going to take a picture of an iPad that is fine, that I use for my demo, but you get the idea. So we get that picture, now we can save it. And so now we have this photo as backup to the iPad that was collected, and we're ready to continue. But the system is smart enough to know that you specified major damage, but you didn't give me any details. Let's go ahead and collect that information now. So we can pick that, also enter in some additional information if we want to. So now we're ready to continue. And you'll see here, the system checked to see if insurance has been purchased by the student for this iPad. And so what that does is now we're able to apply the insurance payment for the repair of the damaged unit, and then we can go ahead and issue the replacement iPad for the student. And that's just a simple matter of going ahead, scanning the iPad serial number, and then go ahead, it creates a new journal record for the new device that was handed out, and we just mark that they got everything in okay condition. And that is the end of the swap process when it's needed. So with that, we added a couple new tabs to our user database. You'll notice here we have a devices tab where the tech team is able to log in, see the newest device that has been handed out and given to the student. Typically, each student is only going to have one device, but because this file handles both students and staff, the staff can have multiple devices. That's why you're actually looking at a portal here. And then on the history tab, what we're able to do is pull up all of those journal records that were created so we can see every device that a particular student has had throughout their history here with the school. And you can look and see, is a student receiving one device per school year, or are they getting 2 or 3 because damage keeps happening to their particular devices? And then we're able to dig into the details for that. All right, so that is Claris FileMaker. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what Claris Connect is able to do for the school. And this is something that once they added the OneRoster and Apple School Manager connectors to Claris Connect, became a game changer for them. So with Claris Connect, the reason why it suddenly became useful, or more useful than it already was, is that the school uses Skyward as its student information system. And Claris Connect can connect to any student information system that uses the OneRoster data format, of which Skyward falls into that category. And so what that's allowed us to do is now we can replace some of those existing export and import processes that we were doing manually. The way that we do that is that we've set up Claris Connect flows using one roster webhooks. And from there, update FileMaker to get the active students using API calls rather than relying on that export file. But in addition to just getting the students, which we could already do with that export file, now we're able to pull information on teachers, classes, courses, and enrollment, or the schedules for each student. And what that has done is now we have expanded the information that is being tracked in the FileMaker solution, which then improves our reporting options because we have this additional information that we're able to call upon. If we wanted to try to get teachers and class information via regular exports, that would have been quite an ordeal, but with these webhooks and the API calls, becomes very easy. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. So here, Claris Connect, we're going to go ahead and sign in with our Claris ID to start. And that brings us in to our project for the New Kensington School District. We see we have one project with 6 active flows in it. So we can go ahead and select that. And there are our 6 flows, one for each of those entities, which we're going to be pulling out of Skyward. And it all starts with a webhook. You'll notice here that we have a webhook for each of those 6 entities. We're going to go and create a new one just by entering the name. You will notice that the name of the webhook is incorporated into the URL for the webhook. So you want to be a little deliberate about the name that you do give it. So as we come down here to the bottom, there's our new webhook. We can see the product API key, or the project API key, as well as the app ID that we're going to need for authentication. And then it also gives us here at the bottom, you can see an example of the curl syntax that we're going to need when we do call that webhook. So once we have that, there's just a couple of settings that we want to check here for this under the webhook is to go ahead and use authentication, because that's always a good idea. And then also we want to make sure that we're returning a response when this webhook is used. So that's the setup of the webhook. Now we can switch back here to our flow. We'll go ahead and create a new flow for this one. It starts with the triggering event is always the first step of the flow. And so we're going to go ahead and select the HTTP and go ahead and say this is going to be triggered by that webhook. From there, we're able to select one of the webhooks that we already have configured. I'm going to go ahead and select the original Skyward Students class. It gives us some instructions about going ahead and sending a request to that webhook so that we have some step data to use as we get into the next steps to configure it. So we can save that trigger. And then once it's saved, we're ready to go ahead and add our first action now. And this one here is we're going to go ahead and use the one roster connector. You can see here's a list of all the different actions that we're able to pull as far as classes and courses, enrollments, locations, schools, students, and teachers. So we'll go ahead and return the list of students. Go ahead and continue. The account is going to be the one roster account, which the system already knows because we're using it elsewhere, so we don't have to re-enter that for this one. And then the last thing to do is just go ahead and configure it using some of the step data that came in as part of the webhook and the API request. So here, record limit is a static value, but we want to make that dynamic. So we can go into the step data that came in step 1 and select the record count. And do the same thing here for the record offset, because there's enough records, we're going to have to make these API calls multiple times. So there's our offset. So that looks good. And then there's a few other fields that we could make dynamic if we needed to, but in this situation we do not, so we can just leave it as is. I'll go ahead and save that. And now the last action that we need to add here is to go ahead and return the information that we collected. So we'll go back to the utilities, go back to the HTTP, and then reply with JSON data. And then the only thing we have to do is make sure that we're grabbing the appropriate data. So we can go and click there. We can get into our step data, which we can call from any previous step, but usually it's the previous step or the most immediate previous step, I should say. And so I'm just going to collapse those to make sure it looks like I'm looking at an array of student data or user data. So that's probably what we want. So we can go ahead and just select that. And now we're going to send that JSON array back when this webhook is triggered. Go ahead and save our flow. Switch over to settings, give our flow a name. Go ahead and get that in there. Save the flow name. And then there's just one more thing that we need to do as we get back over here, and that is to go ahead and enable the flow. You'll see there down at the bottom that we can go ahead and enable it. So that is the setup of the flow. As you can see, it's only 3 steps. It's not extremely, flows can be very complicated or they can be very easy, but they're still going to get you the results that you need. And that's the main thing, of course. All right, so that's on the Claris Connect side. I know there was a little bit of work that needed to happen in the FileMaker Pro user database. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. First thing I did here is I just set up a script that runs when the file opens to go ahead and set some default values, which include, the app ID as well as the product key. Get that information in there in just local variables. And then go ahead and set in global variables the base URL for all of the different webhook flows because they have that same base URL and it's just that suffix, which is the name that gets added on at the end, as well as making sure we have the authorization formatted in the way that the curl statement expects to see it and then to be able to pass it on. So now we can go ahead and scroll down here, get into our students script, take a look at that. See, we're setting the count and offset here values and variables at the beginning. And then we set up a loop step where we're calling a specific script that's actually making the API calls, passing some parameters to say which record count, which offset, as well as which specific webhook to use. And then the response comes back, then we're able to parse it out and then to the different elements here and a couple of local variables. And then once we have that array of users, then we're just able to loop through each item in the array, pull out the specific information for the student, do a search to find out, does that student already exist or not? If they do, we'll update the information. If they don't, we'll go ahead and create them as a new student. Now you'll notice there at the top, I'm pulling a lot of things into local variables. And that's primarily done just for a troubleshooting standpoint. I found it easier to do that because this was actually one of the first API projects that I'd worked on. So I wanted to make sure that everything was working the way that we expected it to work, but not necessarily that you would have to do that. So once we had that information, that additional information, I should say, from Skyward, now we're able to add another tab panel to our user database, and this is showing the enrollment or schedule information for a particular student. Now, if you look at the bottom there, we have a filtered relationship that is highlighting the specific homeroom class or the specific history class for the student. And the reason why that's important is on the handout sheet, you'll notice that we're actually calling out the history class for that student. And the reason why that is done is that especially in K through 12, every student has to take a history class. So by doing the handouts in history class, their tech team is able to spread it out throughout the entire day. And they're not disrupting multiple classes because they're doing something by homeroom where you may get a few students from this class, a few students from that class. They're only interrupting one class at a time that comes down to the library. And by having it sorted by the history class, then that means that somebody doesn't have to print out all 800 sheets and then manually sort them because we have that information already in FileMaker. We can make sure that FileMaker sorts them that way and then prints them out in a very friendly fashion for them. All right, so that is Claris Connect going from Skyward directly into FileMaker. But let's go ahead and talk about Skyward going directly into Apple School Manager. As I mentioned, I think that this uses a separate login, which is the Apple School Manager credentials, if you want to use the Apple School Manager connectors. And the great thing about this part is that it removes the heavy lifting. What do I mean by that? Well, when we had set up the original FileMaker file, we were getting information out of the student information system, but every once in a while I would have to make an update to a calculation or a filter to make sure that we were trimming off, extra spaces, extra carriage returns. We were removing, unallowed characters that Active Directory didn't like. So things have gotten pretty good. Because we've done it for a number of years. So we've accounted for most of those scenarios. But with the connectors in Claris Connect, it validates the source zip file that has been uploaded from Skyward. So we don't have to worry about the quality of the data coming up from Skyward. It extracts the data and the CSV formats that are needed, and then reformats it in what is needed for Apple School Manager. Again, so don't have to think about that. And then the great thing is once that data is reformatted for Apple School Manager, it's able to validate the data before sending it to Apple School Manager and then patch it if necessary. Some of these patches could be if a class was scheduled, students were placed in the class, and then the class was either moved or canceled. You may have some phantom records where students are assigned to a class that no longer exists. So this patching is able to correct those errors before they even get into Apple School Manager. And then the last thing that it does is it goes ahead and automatically uploads the resulting zip file into Apple School Manager. So what does that look like? All right, so here's back in Claris Connect. We're going to go ahead and sign in with our Apple School Manager ID. So here's our new Kensington Arnold team with just our one project here with one flow. And you'll see this flow here has a few more steps, but actually some of these steps are actually repeated. So it's not even as complex as what it appears to be just based on the number of steps. First step is the triggering event, which is the file upload to Claris Connect from Skyward. So all we had to do was have the credentials for Claris Connect that we were able to plug into Skyward so that it could upload its exported zip file into this SFTP site. Save that as the trigger. And now we can get into some of the one roster flow steps, where this one here is we're going to go ahead and validate that zip file that has been uploaded from Skyward. And then for the step data, we just make sure that we're referring back to the file that was uploaded in step 1. Once it's validated, we want to go ahead and extract the individual files that are in that zip file. Again, referring back to step number 2 to go ahead and get those files extracted. And then the next step is with the Apple School Manager Connect Flow step, and that is to go ahead and format those CSV files in the format that Apple School Manager needs. We're going to use the Apple School Manager account. And then for configure, we just make sure that we're grabbing the CSVs that were extracted in step 3. And you'll notice we didn't have to specify all the individual files. The system is smart enough to know that whatever was extracted in step 3, we're going to operate in step 4. And then from there, once we have the reformatted CSVs for Apple School Manager, we went ahead and create a zip file with all of those. So we grab everything that was a result of step 4, create that zip file for Apple School Manager. And then this here is the step that we talked about before, where it's going to go ahead and validate it for us and make sure that all of Apple School Manager's formatting rules are obeyed, and it's going to accept the information that we send it. So again, using the Apple School Manager account, and then we just make sure that we are grabbing that compressed file from step number 5. Now here, because of the nature of the step, it's going to make a choice as to where it goes. So if everything validates okay, we can jump down here to step 12 and then just go ahead and upload that zip file to Apple School Manager. Again, using the Apple School Manager ID. And then here we just make sure that we're grabbing the appropriate zip file that we created there in step 5. Now, if there is an error, we're able to go ahead and do that patch, as I mentioned, where we're going to look for errors and fix those in the CSVs, again, using the Apple School Manager account. And then in configure, we're just going to go ahead and grab the file from step 6. And then here are some options for what we may or may not want to have it patch. In this case, we're having it patch everything that it can. Once it's patched, we go ahead and run the validate again, just to double check. And then we just make sure, once we've confirmed the account, we go over and make sure we're grabbing that new zip or the new file that was patched from step number 8. And then from there, we're ready to go ahead and upload the zip file. And then again, just make sure that we're grabbing the file from step number 9 after it's been validated that second time. And then the last step is just a stop flow because we're now in this branch and we want to make sure that it knows that that is the last operation. So that is the flow. Again, it's not nearly as complex as it looks, but it does an awful lot. I would love to take credit for this script, but we were on the phone with Mark Grantham with Claris, and he helped us set it up and make sure that everything worked because, of course, they want us to succeed because that means that they have succeeded. All right, so let's go ahead and get in and look at the history. And you can see all the different times that this flow has been triggered. You can look at the overall success of each flow, but then you're also able to look at each flow step to see if that flow step was successful or not. Now you'll notice that this one here, there was a couple of errors. So if I click on the error icon, I get the details about what transpired. And you can see I can look into the report. If I don't want to look at it that way, I'm able to go ahead and view the report as a text file, go ahead and download that. And because of this particular step is doing formatting with a zip file, I'm also able to download that zip file so I can dig into those as needed in order to determine what the error means. So here's that same information that was in that JSON object that we were looking at just a moment ago, except it's just in a text file format. And we can look through and see the actions that were undertaken. We can get down and see that, okay, there was an error with the staff CSV that has some invalid emails. It's also telling us which lines in the CSV the errors occurred. So if we want to get into some more information, we can go ahead and open up that CSV. Now I've converted the CSV to an Excel file just to have all the columns line up and make it a little bit easier to see. But this would be the CSV. We can scroll down to the bottom or towards the bottom and get to those lines that were referenced in the error report. And as we get down here, you'll see that in lines 87 and 93, we definitely have blank emails. Now, you would think that Skyward would have told us that those emails were missing because you would think every teacher especially should have an email address. Skyward didn't tell us, but Claris Connect was able to pinpoint the issue and then let us know so that we could get that corrected. As I prepared for this session, I spoke to Phil, who's the IT director there at the school, to see if he had a quote that would kind of sum up his experience as it relates to what Claris Connect has been able to do. And this is what he had to say. He said, 15 minutes after building the flow and entering the correct credentials, information started flowing from Skyward to Apple School Manager. I don't have to worry about it because it just works. And I think that is the main thing or the main takeaway for me is that regardless of what solution we're building for whichever client we're working with at the time, is we want to build them a solution that just works. And with Claris Connect in our back pocket, that is certainly something that we're able to do. And this is proof of that. I'll just go ahead and add the school, obviously, they work with a number of different vendors for different products. They even work with members of our own team here at Cross IT because we also do their network and server infrastructures as well. But because of what we were to the school using the entire Claris platform, they presented me that I'm their favorite because of everything we can do with the Claris platform. So I thought that was pretty cool and worth sharing with you guys. So hopefully you can be somebody's favorite too. All right. So we talked about Claris FileMaker, talked about Claris Connect. Now let's go ahead and look at Claris Studio. And what we're doing here is that we've determined that the school needs a better way to collect information from the students, which probably comes as no surprise because there's two problems. First, the forms, they don't make it home. They either get forgotten or lost. And then the completed forms, they don't make it back for, the same reason. It gets forgotten, the dog eats it, whatever the reason is. So they're not collecting that information that they want to see. And so that's where we're looking at Claris Studio as a method to go ahead and collect these forms and make sure that we have that data that nobody has to then re-enter because we've already captured it electronically. So we're looking at, field trip permission forms, dance registration forms, student handbook acceptance, potentially. So a lot of different possibilities, especially now as things have expanded. They're continuing to iterate on Claris Studio and make constant improvements. And being able to have pre-filled forms has been a game changer for us, because the one thing we did not want to do is, especially for a family that has multiple students, where we're constantly asking for the same information that we already know as they submit the same form 2 or 3 times for the different students. So that's definitely opened a lot of opportunities for us. So let's go ahead and look at that through this example of just a simple student form survey. And so it starts with the list of students here. This is a table that's in Claris Studio. You'll see it's a stripped down version of what you saw in the user table, where we've got name, ID, graduation year, grade level, email address. And the way that this file was populated is that in FileMaker, I was able to go ahead and add a TO of my Claris Studio, and then go ahead and write a script that would copy the active student information from the table in FileMaker over to Claris Studio. Now, in this case, I'm just worrying about one student rather than all students, but I think we've all done those kinds of things where we're copying data from one table and then creating new records in another table. So that's what transpired here. And so then once we have that student information, we can go back into our survey form that was created here. And that is a fairly simple form, just a couple of pages. So on that first one, we're getting that student information because this is not, an anonymous form. We want to be able to track, which student, turned in a response. So we're getting their ID, their name, their graduation year. And then we want to make sure, ask the question, did the form fill in correctly? And then we just have a couple simple questions here on page 2 about, what are you planning to attend the senior prom, and what would you like the prom theme to be? And then we just have our confirmation page. So from this point, we're ready to go ahead and share that form. So we select sharing, go ahead and enable the link. But rather than just sharing the link with everyone, we want to go ahead and do this extra step to create the link for the pre-filled form. And so here we want to select where we're going to pull that information from. In this case, we want to pull it from that students table that we just looked at. And once we have that table selected, we went ahead and put in our formula for how the student ID is going to be filled in using the dot notation that Claris Studio uses. So we're going to pull from the student list spreadsheet and student ID in this case. So that all looks good. And I'm going to quickly fill in for the first name, the last name, and then the graduation year. So that's all we need to worry about as far as, the autofill. And then what it has done is created this calculation for us. As we look at it here, you'll see that it's, the link, but that it includes, field names are pulling from this other table and column name. So we can copy that calculation. And once we have it on our clipboard, we can go ahead and close this out. It's going to ask us if that's really what we want to do. In this case, we do. So we can go ahead and close that. So now from our survey form here, we can go ahead and go back to our list of students. Get into that view. And then here we want to go ahead and add a new column. And this one is going to be a calculation. And so once we've gone in, go ahead and assign it a name for the URL to complete this particular form. And then the calculation, we're just going to paste in the calculation that Claris Studio wrote for us. And now when we come up here, we can see what the result is, where we've got our link to the form, but then we're also saying this field is now equal to this value, this field is equal to that value, based on the information that is in our student table. So let's go ahead and copy that out. Normally we'd be emailing this to the student, but I'm just going to copy it and paste it over here in Safari. We can go to that form and we can see that those first 4 fields that we expected to fill in automatically have been filled in automatically. And then we're able to go ahead and confirm that, yes, the information did fill in correctly. And then from there, just go ahead and scroll down, go on to the next one. And then here, yes, we plan to attend the senior prom. And then, of course, we want to go to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance because those are the best. And then I just used a ranking field type here just because it's pretty cool. So we've got that. Now we can submit it. So the form has been completed by that particular student. Now the only step that's left now is to go ahead and build a view so that the admins can see the results of the survey. So we go ahead and back here, we want to create a new view, but we don't have to worry about trying to build it completely from scratch. So we select the new view button. Going to go ahead and set it up as a spreadsheet because that just feels like the way that we want to view this data, at least to start. And then we're going to go ahead and use the same data as the survey. And then just go ahead and give it a name so we know that this is the survey results. And so now we're looking at our first result from that survey, and then we're able to do additional things with it from there. So that's that simple form collection here in Claris Studio. So we've looked at FileMaker Pro, we've looked at Claris Connect, we've looked at Claris Studio. So what does the future hold? Where do we innovate next? Is the question that I find my asking myself. And so as far as Claris FileMaker, other than updating the layouts in the user table to get that updated and looking a little bit fresher, we'd love to be able to extract the parent and guardian information from Skyward. As you saw, we were able to do some additional things because of that class schedule information we were able to pull. So if we were able to get the parent and guardian information, we would be able to send, targeted emails potentially, also do different things on reports and things like that. Also, the next project for me, when I get back from Engage, is to work on an API call that will send information and an update and put an iPad in a specific group within Jamf, that if we discover that there is an inactive student that is still assigned an iPad. And so what we're able to do is be able to move that iPad into a specific group in Jamf, and then Jamf is able to issue a command for that group to disable the iPads as a way to encourage the student to return the device to the school because it has been disabled. So Claris Connect. The one here is just to really identify other external systems that we're able to automate using the various connectors that are available. Also potentially investigate, what can we do with some of the custom connectors? Now that we're able to create those, are there current processes that we're using, maybe an API call in FileMaker where a custom connector could potentially replace that, simplify things, and also make it more reliable. So we want to look at that. And then the last one is for Claris Studio, a couple things. The first one, of course, is just to move past this proof of concept stage. So we're kind of in that beta testing stage right now. So we'd like to go take that into production, identify the forms that we can collect here throughout the balance of the school year. And then once we're doing that, we want to do some training because typically if there's something that needs to be changed in the Claris FileMaker side of things, they're typically calling me. And so I have to make the change. Where in Claris Studio, we want to do some training so that, the folks that are on the tech team, potentially the office staff, are able to go in and create forms as needed, generate the reports that they want. And then beyond that, what we like to do is that there is, a computer club for students, that this might be a way to introduce them to the Claris platform, is that we can train them how to, create forms for some of their classes and help out, where needed to create the forms and the reports and things in Claris Studio. All right. Well, I thank you all for your kind attention and appreciate you coming and joining me today. Have a great day.